So Dan, I'll start with you. The question really is that we've all been speaking about this glory story because we are $1 billion at retail. But just looking at the lens from a point of view of the Westerners or the people from around the world looking in, why does India present such an opportunity to global licensors like you at Viacom? And then second, even as a licensor, not just as Viacom, but first I can start with as Viacom.
Okay, thank you, Jiggy. Firstly, India's a big market. I mean, the potential of India is huge. We at Viacom have been invested here and have been in India for a long time through our JV Viacom 18. And it's a dynamic territory. Population is obviously key. 1.3 billion is a huge opportunity for any company and any business. Even if we take 10% of the 1.3 billion, which is let's say the active consumer base with high to medium disposable income, that's still a huge, it's a huge potential market for any brand and any. So absolutely that it's exciting, it's dynamic, it's fast developing. The GDP growth of 7% per year is in the UK. We're very jealous. So it's clearly it's a big opportunity for any company. But the key thing is, how do you crack it? As were some of the speakers, it's not the easiest market to crack. There's a lot of cultural and social variances that you have to factor in. So how do you do that? Well, I mean, nobody knows the answer. Many answers, in my opinion. But we're trying, and I think that's the key thing of why this show is here and why I support this show, is because it's important for us to all work together. We're all going to benefit, and everybody wins in licensing. That's the beauty, from the retailer, the licensee, the licensor, and obviously the consumer with more choice and more product to consume. So yes, that's my thoughts.
John, do you want to add to this?
I think, it's interesting. Authentic Brands, we've only been around for about 7 years. And we raised $800 million on the concept of buying IP and global. A lot of competitors in the industry, you would buy a high-end brand, and then you take it to a Walmart, and you would kind of just let it die after 15 years, and you buy the next one. That was actually an okay business model. What's shocking is, started this thing 7 years ago for nothing. Today we have 600 global partners. We own 28 premium brands. We do $5.5 billion around the world. 30 million comes from India. So I think about, there's an old story in sales, because my job is business development, about two shoe salesmen in the 1800s that worked for a British company. And the first one goes down to Africa to find opportunity, and he writes back to his father who owned the company. Complete waste of time. Nobody wears shoes. The next brother goes down, he writes back, opportunity of a lifetime, nobody wears shoes. So when you think about that view of the world, that's how I think of the Indian, right? We were able to build revenue everywhere else, and if you're willing to go to work and you're willing to really understand how fragmented this market is, and if you get in there and you find person after person after person, eventually you will find the right partners who are entrepreneurs that share that allow you to grow your business. So that's why we're super excited about it. The show has been eye-opening though, right? India is A tier. There are massive conglomerates. That's some of the best companies. And then there's a lot of B and C partners that have the ability to really move up if they partner with people around the globe that have that experience and they're open-minded to it. So.
That's a good point. And Maura, not just from the Lima hat that you wear, but also because you ran consumer products in places like Sesame and Viacom. China, in comparison, to this napkin number of 1.3 billion, they've also got the same number, more or less. Why does exponentially and India stays where it is, and we're still looking at India?
Well, I think that's the gazillion-dollar question, right, that everyone wants to know the answer to, because for years, I think most multinationals would put up a PowerPoint, they'd have China and they'd have India, and okay, so you'd be placing your bets And I have to say that I hedged my bets years ago, and I basically bets on both China and India. I still remain bullish on India for a number of reasons. One, I believe that, and why today what Lima can accomplish here with the fraternity that we're developing, and certainly under the leadership of Jiggy. But in terms of what I think has in some ways kept India not as performing as strongly as China is just there's a few structural and governmental issues, frankly, that India was facing versus China. But I think what we're seeing today, and I haven't been here for about 7 years, is a real change in the retail landscape and the business community overall. I think right now what we're seeing developing both order and with e-commerce is going to really propel the licensing industry to be truly the industry that probably was placing bets that it would become. That I think that there are only tremendous opportunities ahead in the next 5 years. It will take work without a doubt, infrastructure and the business of doing business here challenging certainly, but I think what we're seeing today is an emphasis with e-commerce and the retail component and the commitment from manufacturers to brand ownership is really going to be a huge shift in the business of our business. I also think in terms of developing homegrown brands, who's truly believed in India, is that this is a country that has wonderful, wonderful storytelling in its history. And everything in brands really starts with that story and starts with that and that connection. And India, more than countries, has that already. And I think that you're able now to really tell those stories and look at the 60 experience that goes from a great movie, to a great episode, to publishing, to retail. And I've always considered retail another media outlet. And how we tell that story at retail is just at the very beginning stages. So like Jiggy, I truly believe that it will rain, and I think the rain may be starting. From what I've seen yesterday and at the master class on Saturday, there is a commitment to best practices, to coming a fraternity of best practices, and learning from countries, Western Europe, from the United States, and from China, about how to really grow the business of our business. Thank you.
Sandeep, I'm going to just pull you in on the trends that we are seeing in India. We spoke about some of it in the earlier session. You've been both on the entertainment side as well as licensing, intersecting with fashion. Trends in India, and then I'll just jump across and ask, what are the trends happening around the world, and is there any of that intersecting in India?
Sure. If you look at the last 5 years, the most heartening thing for me to witness has been various players in the in the corporate side breaking the mold. We've had licensing in India for about 10 plus years, about 20 years, but it was always and it's still predominantly very templatized, right? There are great companies, Disney, Cartoon Network, so on and so forth, and they've done great business around the globe in key markets, and they've done it very successfully. But as a point made in in your last thing, India is 30 plus countries in one country, right? How do you crack that? And I think some of the most surprise in the last 3 or 5 years has been, look at the names, HRX, Green Gold, Patanjali, right? And a few more wrong. I think what's made them successful is the people behind them have been successfully able to break the so-called mold, the model, the formula of licensing. They've created a new model where it's more about co-create and collaborate. The onus is not on the licensor alone, not on the licensee alone, and not on the retailer alone. The onus is on 3 or 4 of these parties to sit together and say, how do we make this a 200 crore, 300 crore brand in 3 years, right? The responsibility of the licensor does not end by giving the brand and the assets to the licensee. The responsibility of the licensor ends by just creating a product and putting it in the market. The responsibility of the retailer doesn't end by just selling it there. Sit together and say, how do we take it to the next level? And I think some of the success stories here, I think over the last 3 years, have showcased that it can be done. And every opportunity in India, but it's like a great script in Bollywood which has been doing the round for the last 10 years. Somebody's got to make the movie, right? Great script, but we're too far obsessed with numbers. And it's an ideas-driven business. You've got to create great that appeal to, to people who want to invest in buying those products. There are fewer discussions today on what are those innovative ideas, products, how to excite the end consumer. So I think seeing things from the consumer's perspective, breaking the mold, creating newer models of business, I think that's what will guide India over the next 5 years to a great opportunity, and I believe it is, but that lies 5 to 10 years from now. Cogs fall in place.
I think even expanding on, if you've done business in China, it's not the easiest place to work, right? And the fact that very few people speak English fluently in the country, it just goes to show you that they have a fragmented system with a lot of bureaucracy. And the beauty of licensing, if you've never been in it or you've just started to eke your way into it, is it has the ability to jump those government hurdles. So if you look at what's happened in China, and where I've done a lot of business there, what you'll find is, as fragmented as the country is, you find all these regional operators that are very, very good. And so licensing is able to basically find that best regional operator, bring all of those people together, and you allow them to operate somewhat autonomously under this is what the brand is. And we've launched a lot of brands very successful there, as I'm sure a lot of the other people on stage have. India is the same thing, but it has one bigger advantage. Everyone speaks English, or at least a large majority of the population. So when you look at what a brand can do for you, because I've had a lot of conversations of people that are very new at the show so far that have come up and said, okay, well, I don't get licensing. I'm going to spend money when I could just build the brand myself. I already know how to make a great product. I know how to service it. I'm doing it with my own private label brand. The fact that a lot of the country can go online and see the story in Europe or see the story in the US, they see the social media posts, they see the digital engagements, all of the sudden what would have taken to build, that customer experience and that loyalty to that brand and that emotional tie to that brand can happen inside of 5 minutes online. And that's why I see such an opportunity here. And I think it's a little bit of an evolving mindset. But to me, there's way more opportunity here in India than there is long-term, even in China and what I've seen.
Go ahead, Dan.
I was just going to add, I completely agree, and I think the beauty of a market like India is you can learn that have been made in mature markets like the UK for decades, all the key learnings and the ways we've tailored and realized actually it's better to do something this way or that way. It benefits the client better, it's better for the consumer, it's better for the retailer. You can benefit from all of that knowledge. We've learned the hard way over decades, and we can kind of skip that part. Best practice in a market like India, and I think that's what's exciting to me. And whether that's the development of mono-brand retail, for example, where whether it's a franchise model or a licensee model, it's very exciting. You've got Toys R Us and Babies R Us launching in India. Fantastic. These are great developments in a territory. So I think that's what's interesting and exciting for me, is how you can skip some stages which were painful stages for licensors over the years.
I'm just going to, Sandeep brought up a point which I would have brought up much later, like I need to bring out the violin and play it. It may border on complaint, but my perspective is that if you sense it, what makes companies keep investing? And when we talk about co-create and collaborate, do you really believe that licensors do enough, especially if the motivation is they've got to make revenue, right? So if this market's not spinning quick enough, would you be motivated to keep at it? That's my first question. And second is, it's a pet peeve, and I speak on behalf of the licensee time, that the burden on minimum guarantees, the royalties, the same one-size-fits-all Western world used in, say, India, and expecting that without build of brand, is that fair? So my question is all related to co-create and collaborate. Are we doing as licensors?
I'll just jump in. Truly optimistic industry, so that we're all believers. And we always believe that there will be the next around the corner. So we are a continuously optimistic industry by nature. So I think that bodes well for all of us. I do think, coming from two multinational companies based, that took a position in international, but nevertheless it was very challenging. And I not speaking out of school here, I was very vocal within my organization to in market was at a very different pace than what you would be investing in, say, Western Europe. By the same token, in terms of managing the day-to-day businesses and also like minimum guarantees, you needed to have a different set of expectations and metrics. So I felt very strongly that there needs education going back and forth to make sure that principals at parent companies really understand the nature of the business day to day in the markets that you're entering in, and so that you're not putting certain standards in place in terms of minimum guarantees that at the very beginning, your ability to really get into the market and forge partnerships. At the end of the day, I think Dan has said it, we've all repeated this over the last, this is an industry that we all win at. We're all in it, and at every stage of the winning, we're all winning. Conversely, we're all losing if we're not participating and sort of investing appropriately, then no one really wins. So the idea that you can invest in your partnerships and in developing those partnerships, it will come back to you, but it does take, I believe, a lot of investment on the part of the folks on the ground who are doing business in these markets to educate their counterparts who are making decisions about marketing budgets and investments and collaborations and what it really takes to truly drive those kind of successful partnerships.
I think on the guarantee question is, let's talk specifics, because that's what people want to know, right? The guarantees are a tough conversation to have as a licensor, and a lot of times what I'll always remind my younger salespeople, because the first thing a lot of licensees will sit down and say is, what's the guarantee? And I always, let's talk about the size of the business, right? I don't know the Indian market, but here's the thing. I asked you for $100 million a year, but it was $1 billion or $100 billion business, all of a sudden you'd say no problem. When you are on the licensee side, the first thing you should be looking for is somebody not asking for the guarantee first, asking for first. Because if they're going to ask you that question, they're probably going to be once you have the business plan, it gets a lot easier to have a conversation about guarantees, right? Because now you kind of know it's something you believe in. You shouldn't put a plan you shouldn't sandbag it either, because if you put it too low, the odds are you're not going to get it because you're probably competing with somebody else. So what I found is the best partners we've had, okay? Now, even when we get to a middle ground, then usually the next part of the negotiation is we're going to put resources in, we're going to market, we're going to do all these things, the licensee will say to us. And the analogy that I always use as the licensor is, I completely agree, I've accepted your business plan, I really understand where you're going with this. You have to think of this like real estate. Once I have rented you the penthouse apartment, so the core category for this brand, if you make a mistake in the market and you burn the penthouse down, or you screw up the brand, or you ship bad product, okay, you could knock me out of the next 5 to 10 years. Not to mention you could damage the brand for all the other categories in the market. So as the licensor, you have to understand when you're negotiating this as a licensee, that's what you're up against, right? The person on the other side is not a bad person. They're not saying it's just a cash grab, it's a cash grab, I've got to have this. But they need some of that protection, because if I have 600 partners around the world, there'll be 20 every year that may not work out. And that's okay. If it's a good partnership, neither side should get hurt too bad in that, but you do have to have some protection. So that's why people are asking you for guarantees. So the best advice I can give to you is, yes, people will be very patient because of this market and they see the long-term opportunity. Make it about the business plan and you'll get to a place you generally feel pretty comfortable. And if you don't feel comfortable signing a guarantee, the best of anybody in this room, don't sign it, because you will be in a bad position 3 years down the road, and it'll be a bad relationship for you and that licensor, and there's probably a lot more things you can do together.
Can I add to that? I completely think the joke in the market, MGs in India stand for maximum guarantee. It's not the minimum guarantee anymore, and that's a fact. I think things like minimum guarantees and stuff like that, I think they can be completely done away with. It's also to do the business with. If you are the right partner, if you're the one who can do, who can bring a scalable, sustainable model, do justice to the brand thing, MG or no MG doesn't matter. I know you will create a good business. That's one. Two, coming back to your point about co-create and collaborate, I think the third important thing there is co-own. Right? Trend that we've seen in the last 3 years. 3 people, 4 people coming together to share an IP in various ratio and they've been able to build great business. An online guy, an offline guy, and so I think that might be the future. That if somebody helps a great value within my brand, I'm happy to give 15, 20%, 25% away, because there's nobody else who can bring that scale except for that guy. So I think
To us, to a lot of us in India, we believe that the West built a phenomenally iconic brand in the West, but that greatness doesn't percolate to India. You talk about a franchise strategy or you talk about brand building, that brand building never happens, and then you've licensed out the brand, but there is no build, there's only license. So that was my question. So there's two questions to you.
Firstly, licensors can always do more. That nobody rests on their laurels. Nobody thinks, okay, I've got great brands, here you go, Jiggy. That the principle is, between the licensor and the licensee, and as the two principles in the relationship. Now, as we said, when one wins, the other wins. But for me, the fundamental, and I've built consumer product businesses in Russia, in Africa, and the Middle East, so I understand how difficult it is to build a brand in a new market, in a new territory. There's an education involved for the retailers, for the consumers, for the licensees and the licensors. From my point of view, it's a long time. When you do a deal with a licensee, it's 2 years minimum, normally, maybe 3 years. So it's a long-term partnership. Do you want to start on the wrong foot with a licensee that you're going to see and speak to for 3 years? No, I don't. Life's too short. I want to have a happy partner, and I think that's important, to be fair and to remember, why screw somebody over on day one when you have to see them again and again and again for 2 years? It doesn't make any sense. It's a win-win potential relationship, and that's why I have no interest in cash flow of a company who's never worked with licensing before on the MG by being too aggressive on the terms. It has to work for the licensee, it has to work for the licensor. But in a market like India, the key things for me is, be fair on the product liability insurance, the public license as well. We don't need to use the $1 million level, for example, in a market like India. It doesn't make sense. So it's important to be like bamboo rather than an oak tree, and be flexible and fair with clients. With creative and style guides, should we have bespoke artwork which resonates more with an Indian consumer? Absolutely, but at the same time retain the brand integrity. So there's a lot of moving parts to the deal and working with licensees in India.
Also, just want to add, since I've launched some successful brands and I've also failed at some brands, I've learned more from the failure, because what it really came down to was when we did our sort of post was that the brand owners didn't take the time to really invest properly in the market, and we were going too soon. We needed to really develop a place to be able to have the consumer respond to the brand. And I think that's also a big part. There's also what I call the mechanics of our business with negotiating and the deal terms and all of that. But I think what it also really starts with is how are you really receive your brand, and the investment you as the property owner to take the time to develop it. And it's not necessarily the same that you would do in every other country or at the same investment level, but it needs, and I think that's a big part of sort of what I call sharpening your tools before you even get where you're negotiating the deal terms and you're developing your brand exposure through all the different licensing. But again, to reiterate what the folks here have been saying, which is that you need to really invest in developing the partnerships, and it really is a win-win, and you want to create an environment for your brand that takes advantage of why you're entering this market, combined with the brand equity of what you're bringing into the market. So it truly is something that stands out, but also takes advantage of the nuances of the market.
We were talking about trends, just for a moment, to a dead serious trend. Elvis is dead for 40 years, one of the highest paid celebrities in the world. David Bowie, 2016 did $27 million. So, John, you on Authentic Brands, how brands stay relevant after the past?
Our business is unique because we own a lot of fashion brands, but we have this celebrity pillar, and we've been so successful with dead celebrities that he's come to us and say, can you do this for us? And it's been kind of interesting. When we first started, we said, you know what, we don't like live celebrities because you never know when they're going to get drunk and drive, right, or get caught doing something illegal. So what we did realize over time was, you know, it's about content and it's about interaction. It doesn't matter if a brand that's dead, a celebrity that's alive, or a fashion brand. Somebody feels when they engage with that entity, right? And so we refer to this in our business. So if I see Elvis Presley, right, I have an emotion towards Elvis. And what we found is when we looked at it at the estate, when we purchased this, now we kept the family 20% involved in the business. So they're part owners. So we always have that core essence. The next thing we'll do generally is dive deeper, and we'll look at what has happened to most dead celebrities. Is people are so busy licensing the low that they haven't, like the former owners of the estate, they haven't really thought long term about building it like a brand. So for example, when we took over Elvis, most of the licensing income was coming in from Fat Elvis, right? The Vegas Elvis with the big sideburns, because it was obvious, right? You throw them on some t-shirts, you do a lot of impersonators, but that's not a strategy. Right? That's a transactional business, and it's a cash grab in all these little areas. We stepped back and we said, okay, here today, and Elvis was in his prime. Which Elvis would he be? And the young, cool 1950s Elvis, which, you know, was that James Dean kind of era, the great hair, right? And so you step back and you say, okay, that's the Elvis that we're going to promote. These are the photos we're going to use. This is the style guide. This is the brand essence. Now partners that share that same vision, they might want to make that leather jacket. Or a perfect example is the greatest hair of all time. So what did we do? He's Americana with amazing hair. So we go to Revlon and American Crew, which is and we make Elvis the face of that line. And we use all of the black and white photography, and it becomes this amazing campaign with pop-up shops and engagements. And now I've got young people talking about Elvis where they never would have talked about it before. All of a sudden, that builds online, right? So then we have a whole digital strategy that surrounds it. And then we get back into Hollywood and we do documentaries, and we have all different kinds of biopics and things coming out. And that's how you basically, whether it's a brand or a dead celebrity, that's how you bring that back to life. It's constant engagement. Marilyn Monroe, when we bought Marilyn Monroe's estate, you know, there was 200,000 fans on social media. Today, and the engagement is higher than Lady Gaga's on any given week, which is incredible. But it's all about the content machine partners you're looking for in licensing.
Sandeep it died on me. Yeah.
I think we're back.
Sandeep, any dead celebrities here in India, or that you think? I just saw R.K. Lakshman. I believe that's
The IP belongs to us, right? But hard to come up with one name, you know, who's no more, who in India, who we think could have a great licensing opportunity, which could connect with, you know, people who were there when he was alive, or DG right now. I can't think of, you know, also because I think there are bigger opportunities already, which have still not been encashed.
with the alive ones.
With the alive ones. You know, I mean, look at Bollywood. Barring a Salman Khan, you know, and I think great credit to what the Mandanas have done with it. I can't think of anybody else in a retail environment under a single brand shop who could command, you know, such a growth story. What they've managed. There've been fragrances launched under various, you know, Bollywood celebrities in the past. Be it Amitabh Bachchan, you know, so it hasn't worked. Probably it has not. Probably the partners were not right. Probably it was ahead of time. But I think, you know, this whole Bollywood thing, I think it's slowly starting getting cracked with, you know, Being Human, with HRX, with this Mistaken by, you know, with Kriti Sanon. And there are more and more. Deepika Padukone is getting into, you know, so there are newer alternate models emerging between, you know, the celebrities, the personalities, and the end retailers, and, you know, people who can unlock value out of it. And I think going forward, that will be a trend that you'll see more.
Dan, a question to you on retro is back. I saw Rugrats is back in the world. It's a blast from the past. Is that a trend that you're seeing?
Absolutely, but again, the trends have to make sense for the target territory. So the retro has the old Nickelodeon brands, for example, that we're relaunching. Makes sense. Knows it? Then absolutely. It means different things to different people. It's 35 years old now, so there's people have grown up, and what it means to a millennial, it means something completely different to me. I'm 42. So I think it's important to remember what the brand's integrity is, what the core values are, and how it relates to the territory and the target demographic. And that's going to be different all over the world and has, different nuances to it. But in regards to global trends, I mean, again, just talking about how India can benefit from the learnings that other markets have been through. At the moment, I'm amazed at how social media stars, YouTube talents, and how they have a huge following online. And again, I wish I understood 70 million views on YouTube. Now, this is off the charts, amazing. Now, she now has an IP that we are licensing. So again, look, if I were you in India, I would, as much as we want all of your business at Viacom and Nickelodeon, look at your local YouTube talent. Is there somebody there who's built up a very loyal fan base, and maybe that IP is worth licensing on products? So a lot of exciting developments which are new to mature markets, and you can into in India.
Dan, we'll just stay on technology because I wanted to throw that to the entire group. How do you see this entire digital booms? When we look at it from a context of India, second biggest smartphone market, massive internet penetration growing, disruption by way of what they've done. How does this entire digital world impact licensing? One of which Dan spoke about is YouTube stars. But beyond that, does it help or does it change your current businesses? Do we need to get more nimble?
Can I start by making one point? I think we're living in a time looking up. Everybody is looking down. The world is in your palm, it's in your mobile devices. And I think we're having a good discussion with somebody, a tech company in Bangalore, who said, look, because nobody looks out, everybody is looking on the device. The shop, the retail environment, everything is in their hands. They have it. And I think that's what we have to deal with, and that's what we have to address going forward. And also and there are no boundaries it brings with it. Companies like Flipkart, Myntra, Amazon, what it could do in 5 years, what it took the conventional retailers 20, 25 years to achieve. So.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, what was interesting is the more we looked at it, as the same that they are in the U.S. and very similar to Europe. So what used to be, and this is going to be a big concern of all the people out there that say, okay, well, how are you marketing in the territory, right? Are you just taking my royalties, and how much are you doing to help me be successful? That cost-benefit equation used to be a lot more difficult before social media. And by the way, in places where the social media platforms are different, like China, it actually gets a lot more expensive to translate the content, fan base. In the case where Instagram, Facebook, YouTube are as big here as they are in America, what happens is you get a huge cost-benefit analysis, which allows us as the licensors to support the licensees that much more. And you should be challenging your licensor what is your plan? What assets am I going to get? What do you provide? Right? Because I have yet to see globally a partnership take off, grand slam home run, where you don't have the licensor and both participating on the marketing side. And a lot of times it's licensor living at 200,000 feet doing the halo, but then working very closely to say, how do we take that content and make it domestic so it's relevant? Because they know that much better. So, our view of the world is it's been a game changer for our business, and it really has been a game changer for our life, just for the fact that it's such a benefit from a cost standpoint, the scale of efficiency, where I used to have to go buy TV time and billboards and everything else.
But Mona, is that a new licensing? I mean, the content guys are already figuring that out, right? When we always saw that TV was the only preserve, suddenly people have gone straight on to digital. What do we, from a licensing point of view, is it changing? Because India will come to that straight off, as Dan said, versus having to wait from a chronology.
I agree with you. I think that it is countries like India to jump forward. and learn from the mistakes of other countries. But really, it's breaking down the cost of entry into the world of licensing, because on two fronts. One, it's really democratizing the access to great content, because of social media platforms, that place where you can really converse in a way that terrestrial TV or traditional TV or media. So you get to really hear in real time back from your consumers what they're thinking, how they're engaging with your brand, and allows you to really sort of make real-time adjustments, if you will, to how you really go at that consumer. So that's on the engagement level, and then selling to those customers, those consumers. It also jumpstarts the opportunity for consumers in the, what historically have been the third or even further off cities that would not really be part of anyone's first 5-year business plan. You really would always go after the first and maybe the second tier cities. Now that's all shot to pieces, because you can go much more wider, much more quickly in a way to, because you can really engage. If your brand is with those consumers based on what's coming back, their experience with your content, you can then tailor your e-commerce site to be able to reach those markets that 5 years ago, you would have not been looking at for another 10 years. So it's certainly changed the face of licensing on that front, in terms of how you engage both on a media consumption and on a traditional retail consumption as well. And it's exciting. I mean, it really is breaking down the barriers to business in markets like India.
Before we open it up to everyone in the room, what is e-commerce actually doing around the world? Because, as I was saying, the third aspect which was missing was retail, which was not touching our consumers, even though there was a great interest for brands. We understand it's far, far bigger in the West. Is e-commerce actually changed the game when it comes to licensed offerings, or it's too exaggerated?
Absolutely. I mean, online sales, online retail is the best thing that's happened since the smartphone. And without the smartphone and online retail, they're quite interlinked, in my opinion. It's that ability for a consumer to browse and work out trends around, and it makes people more competitive, and it makes you have to have a compelling price point for the consumer, because they can buy it somewhere else. Yeah, I think it's extremely important, and I would also say that a key part of online is how a consumer can work out trends. I was talking to somebody yesterday about fidget spinners, which is a big playground trend in the UK and in many other territories. And I was saying, oh, have you had them in India? And they were saying, yeah, but it's already dying as a trend. So, and that literally is a mirror of the UK. So for a market it made me realize how global we are now, and truly when it comes to kids, they will watch things online and YouTube talent, etc., and they're across a trend before a licensee or even knows it exists. And I think that's the important thing to remember from when you're a licensor in the entertainment space or the kids space, is this is a business run by adults for kids. Now, we may think we know what they want. We may think we know what content is going to work and resonate with them. But ultimately, it's the kid and the parents which know. It's always important to be humble and remember that, and online retail is a key in that.
Yeah, I think it's probably a little different in India than in the US. One of the most interesting things that I think has happened to retail, as far as it moving to e-commerce, as it relates to licensing, has had a lot to do with how you form your partnerships. Because at least in the US, you used to be able to find one retailer that would buy narrow and deep, right? There was only so much space on the floor. So as the licensee, it was easier, making 100 SKUs or 50 SKUs, whether you're in jewelry, apparel. And today, what Amazon does is they buy narrow and wide. So now I'm having challenges with MOQs. Now I have to have 10 times the number of, and the floor is infinite. And what it's doing is it's putting a lot of pressure on both the licensee and the licensor, because the licensor is having to evolve from saying, okay, I used to get one big contract with one partner, and we go to Macy's and they buy really deep. And so you get those scales of efficiency. So, e-commerce has been a little bit of a blessing and a curse. But the opportunity in that curse is the licensees that can figure out that piece of the puzzle are the ones that are going to print money into the future. And if they can find the right licensor to partner with, where it's even a bigger benefit if you're the licensee, is when I store upon a brand, or if I go looking for that brand, that's the way I found it. Now, search box comes up. If you're partnered with a good brand, somebody types that in, and boom, you instantly get the credibility in the sale. So that's where the benefit of that has worked out for us. But it hasn't all been...
Goes back to the power of a good brand, because it is about discoverability. Again, we're all consumers, we're all making choices every day, largely based on brand choices, right? So we understand intuitively what it takes to really make that selection. And online, it's all the more important to yourself as a licensee or a manufacturer with the brand that's really invested in telling that brand story in a way that's going to cut through, so that the discoverability is what you're really looking for. And so looking ahead, what I see as the biggest trend, or the biggest challenge, if you will, around e-commerce is really creating those online stories that are going to resonate with the consumer, so that the discoverability is, because that's what's the differentiator ultimately.
And I would add, again, adapt and work with the online retail channel as a licensor. Should, for example, Nickelodeon, we have a shop in a shop on online retail portals around the world. We'll give them video game assets that the kid can interact with in between shopping. With the online retailer, again, it's all about a partnership with them, and work together to make a compelling story for the consumer.
Great. Sandeep, you have this?
You've covered everything. I said what I had to.
Great. I'll open it to the audience if you have questions to any of the panelists.
Thank you. Internationally, have PE funds or venture capitalists actually according threshold significantly large valuations to a licensee organization scalability to do? Do funds find their way to licensees and valuations to actually support that scalability? Are there international trends that you could throw some light on?
I think that I just want to make sure that I'm clear on the question. The question is, if you absolutely yes, right? The advantage, if I'm a private equity person, I'm going to invest in your business, great license, is the capital investments to build a brand are significantly reduced, right? So the trade-off should be, and the question that if I'm on the PE side of things, and a bunch of different brands, which means we're looking at businesses all the time, the question that you have to ask yourself is there scalability, right? Because they care about how quickly they can get an ROI on their investment. You should do that significantly faster than starting yourself. Now, yes, there's those anomaly stories of people that have built brands overnight, but they're few and far between. There's a lot more people that have gone out and gotten a great license and overnight been able to become a category captain oftentimes. I remember a story in licensing, and you hear this all the time the more you come to these conferences, and it's why they're so good. A partner that was, he had a small business, it had just failed, and he was walking the aisles of a supermarket, and he saw the paper for his kids, and he realized there was no character-based licensing at that time on the lunch bags. Within 12 months, he had gotten a license, and his business had gone to $30 million. Right? If he had just gotten into paper lunch bags in any way, I don't care how big, there was no chance he was going to have that kind of acceleration. So as long as you have the right plan and you have the right brand, you absolutely should be getting credit from your PE firm. The one thing also that they'll be looking at is they're going to want to understand the longevity of it, right? Do you have renewal period, able to build this over a long period of time? What happens if this doesn't work out? So you have to be ready to address those issues, but I definitely credit for it, story the right way, and it's a good partner.
And I would just add to that, absolutely, if you're investing in a business and they have a license, to inflate the value of that business. But two things to be mindful of. One is most licensors will have a clause in their contract with the licensee called a change of ownership. Basically, that will be triggered if they sell or are taking their company to a third party. The licensor has the right to terminate the contract if they choose to. Or it can trigger a penalty clause where the licensee will have to pay the licensor It might be the equivalent of the last 4 years royalty paid, for example. Things you should be aware of if you're investing in a company which has a license. And also a license has a term, so that term will expire at some point, and there's no guarantee that a licensor will renew the term. There may be competition, there may be a better offer on the table from somebody else. Loyalty is important, and licensors will often renew and want to renew with the same licensee because, again, it's the long term. But yeah, there's a couple of clauses in contracts that all people should be aware of.